yeah, I think we can get started. If anyone else wants to join, they can join after. But yes, I'd like to welcome everybody who's been able to join today. Welcome to our first ever Turnover Group Black History Month webinar. This evening, we're joined by some of the UK's most inspirational Black leaders, and we want to use this platform to amplify the voices of Black leaders through an empowering and meaningful discussion. So it's an opportunity to promote equality, discuss some of our panelists' experiences, celebrate their achievements, and explore what our panel are proud to be in line with the Black History Month theme this year. So today you can be expecting around 45 minutes of an engaging conversation, a debate, generally a forward-thinking discussion, focusing on the importance of being proud, proud to be yourself, proud of your background, and generally how this self-belief, self-love can lead to greater success in the workplace. We're also going to be discussing how Black leaders can further support the community, how allies of the Black community can practice genuine support and create more inclusive workplaces. And generally after the debate, we're going to have a live Q&A. So anyone in the audience, if you have any questions, send them through on the chat. Send them throughout the webinar, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible at the end. But with respect to our panel and audience, we'll try not to overrun with time. You can also message me privately and the panelists privately if you have any questions that you want to be asking privately. But after that, we'll be having a networking session that we should run for around 30 minutes. Lucy will share the link in the chat throughout the webinar. And yeah, for those of you that haven't spoken to me before, my name is Chammi. I am a consultant at Broadgate Search, which is part of Turnover Group. I support high growth technology-enabled businesses through the provision of accounting and finance resource. I'll be the host and chair of this webinar. And before I introduce the panel, we just need to go through a few housekeeping. So throughout this webinar, we'll be running a series of polls. These are designed to gain insight on your views and steer the panel discussion throughout the evening. These will pop up on the screen for 60 seconds at a time, and it will be great to see as much interaction as possible. This webinar is also being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So please remember to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and also TikTok. But yeah, and it's also important for us to start by touching upon why we at Turnover Group do organize and run these type of events. Our mission is to build diversity, create inclusion, encourage workplace innovation by having these meaningful conversations. We're able to drive change. So this is something that I've personally experienced through leading the Black History Month celebrations this year and being part of the diversity innovation team, specifically the ethnicity pillar. It's been really, really eye-opening. And so for those of you that don't know, we did have an internal Black History Month workshop last week where we raised money for the charity Runnymede, had a book launch, live Q&A with an author, the author Saskia. She wrote the book Hair Evolution. And this was discussing the challenges that Black people face in the workplace, specifically Black women, our hair, our experiences, and we were able to create such a safe environment for everyone to have a really open discussion. People really opened up. They were asking us questions that they may not have been comfortable to ask beforehand. And it was really good to see that everyone took something away from the conversation. And that is exactly what I want to achieve today. I want to create a safe environment alongside such incredible forward-thinking speakers and experts on topics that it's really close to my heart, and I'm sure close to other, the panelists' hearts as well. And yeah, just from meeting all the panelists in person, I just felt really inspired, to be my authentic self. And I know a lot of Black people really struggle with that. And that's something that I've really taken away from just speaking to everyone so far. And I hope, other people can pick up something else as well. But yeah, it's very important for us to have these uncomfortable conversations it's a tool for driving change, and we must be uncomfortable to drive change. But yeah, I could go on and on about myself for ages. So I'm going to introduce the panelists. And the first person I'm going to introduce is Rashid. He is Operations Director at Black Swan Data. If you can start off with just telling us your name, your role, your place of work, industry, and answer the question, what are you proud to be?
Yeah, thank you, Chammi. Yeah, I'm Rashid. I work for a company called Black Swan. As Chammi said, I'm the Data and Operations Director there. And it's a market research SaaS startup. So we have a SaaS tool that we use to predict upcoming trends using social data. And for me, what I'm proud to be is I'm proud to be here amongst some really inspirational people to use my voice to hopefully have some conversations that could and hopefully will inspire change.
Really great to hear. And the next person I'd like to introduce is Ollie. She's a business restructuring advisor, capital markets M&A specialist, and the founder of Fully Boss.
Hi, right. So I am, in terms of, I guess, answering your questions, an interesting one, because I am a managing director partner at Accenture, but I have recently resigned. So I will be moving to EY. So I'm in that kind of awkward position at the moment where, yeah, I'm in transition to Ernst & Young, but I will be joining them for a really exciting role, leading the strategy and M&A practice across Asia Pac. So really excited about that. But the role officially starts in November. So Chammi also mentioned that I've just launched an initiative called Fully Boss, which I'm really excited to get into as well later today. I am proud to be an advocate in this space. I'm really proud to use my network, use my platform to sponsor others and to be the voice for others where potentially they don't have a voice. So I'm really excited to be here and get into lots of uncomfortable discussions. Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you here. Definitely going to be having some uncomfortable discussions. But yeah, next person would be Sistieta. She's a global financial services and regulatory compliance risk executive.
Hi. Okay, so I'm probably sort of in the same sort of transition stage as Ollie. But in the past 5.5 years, I have led the global regulatory compliance monitoring and testing program at Bloomberg. And before that, I was at Brain Dolphin, again, looking after the regulatory risk and compliance. So I am a regulatory risk and compliance executive. And before that, I was at HSBC, funny enough, actually facing clients, so sitting on the other side and actually managing portfolios. I am always proud to use my voice and use my learnings or lessons learned along the way in bringing others along and making sure that others don't face the same challenges that I face as much as possible as I can. So in terms of what I'm proud to be, I'll probably say I'm proud in being very bold in owning my identity and being very comfortable in being myself and being very comfortable being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what I'm proud to be.
I love that. And yeah, our next panelist is Yvette.
Hi, Chammi. Thanks for the invitation tonight. So I'm Yvette Forrester. I currently work as a project manager at the Bank of New York Mellon, and I'm also a governance and diversity and inclusion consultant for Howlett Brown, which is a people intelligent company, which kind of feeds my passion around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in terms of being proud to be, I'm proud to be myself, my authentic self. I'm proud to be an advocate for others. I'm proud to open a door to let the others in. I'm proud to plant seeds of at least having that conversation, see whether they bloom or they go out into the ether as tumbleweed. And I'm really glad that we're going to be having this conversation today with, I'm going to say, my new friends that I've just made.
No, I'm so excited as well. I think it's going to be very engaging. I hope we actually fit everything into the time frame. I'm very conscious of time right now, but last but not least, Vona.
Hi, Chammi. Thanks for having me on this panel. So I'm Bruno. I'm currently Global Director of Accounting for JLL. It's a real estate and investment management global organization. In terms of what I'm proud to be, I was thinking about it, and I would say that I'm proud to be me. I was thinking that actually, if I got the opportunity to come back to this world, I would come back and ask to come into the same family. I would ask to come back and be born in the same country I was born in, Nigeria. And that I would actually ask to have the same lovely chocolate brown skin that I have. So I'm very, very proud to be me. I'm also proud to be the representation that I didn't have when I started my career in KPMG 20, how many years ago? In 2005. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I wanted to start off the discussion, discussing, what you're proud of, proud of being yourself. That's something that you've mentioned right now. I'm going to direct this question straight to you. So how do you think you've owned the narrative in your career, and why has being authentic, why is that so important to career progression, to business, and to people from represented communities?
Okay, so I'll answer that. There's two questions. The first one is how I've owned my narrative in my career is, I think the realization very early on that my career is my responsibility. People can help along the way. I obviously utilize tools in becoming successful, but it's very much my responsibility. And one of the things that I did in owning the narrative in my career is making sure that I was reassessing regularly along the way. So when I joined, I started my graduate role at KPMG. I was there for I was there first 3 years, qualified as a chartered accountant. After that, I stopped and I reassessed. Do I still enjoy this role? Do I still want to be here? The answers were yes. And so I stayed on for another 3 years. At the 6-year point, I asked myself the same question. Do I still enjoy being in KPMG? Yes. Do I still enjoy my role? Yes. My goal when I joined was I was going to become the first female Black partner at KPMG. Did I think I could achieve that goal? Yes, was my answer. Did I have what it took to achieve the goal? The answer was yes. Now, the question of whether or not I was willing to put in what was required to achieve the role, to achieve the goal of becoming the first female partner, that's where I was no longer sure that my answer was yes. Because at that point I was also considering work-life balance, and I looked at people ahead of me who were going for that goal, and I saw the sort of hours they were doing. I was already doing crazy hours, weekends, 1 a.m. every single day. And at that point I reassessed and said, actually, I'm not sure that I want to keep doing that until I achieve that goal. And so I went back and said, why did I set the goal? 2 reasons. I wanted to be successful in my career, number one. Number two, I wanted to be the representation that I didn't have when I joined. And so I realized that I could achieve those 2 things elsewhere. It didn't have to be at KPMG. So I gave myself the permission to release myself from that goal, and I was able to move on. And so that's a process that I have done every single time regularly. When I left KPMG, I joined BNP Paribas, and then I moved to GLL. And so that's how I've kind of owned the narrative in my career. When I was quite younger in my career, I had the opportunity to speak to students, younger people who were just starting off. And so I said, oh, you have to define your career. And one of the things I said, I'll read it. I said, to define one's career means to have a clearly defined path in which you want the working aspect of your life to go. A couple of years later, I looked at that and said, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how do you clearly define the path? And I changed that to say that actually, to define your career means to create an outline of the path that you want the working aspect of your life to go. So it's creating an outline, but it's not going to be a clear path. I don't think it's always a clear path, but it requires you to stop and assess regularly along the way and adjust for life, because life happens and other things happen. So that's my answer to the first question. The second question about being authentic. Why is being authentic important in business? First of all, for me, authenticity is one of my core values. It's very important to me, but it's important to business. Like, as individuals, we all interpret and interact with the world in a way that is reflective of our personalities, our unique identity, our culture, our personal experiences. And so in a business environment, if you create an environment where everyone feels comfortable being their authentic selves, you've created a positive culture. And a company's culture is what makes it unique. I won't say it's almost like the company's personality. So people are attracted to the culture or the personality depending on whether it's positive or not. And what you find is that it's what differentiates the company from its competitors. Like if you have a culture that's positive, you're going to have motivated employees, you're going to have people that are performing well. And I think I'll end with this, that amazing people want to work with amazing companies.
Mhm.
And those amazing people are usually the catalyst for creating ongoing business success. So that's my that's my conclusion, to say that authenticity is very, very key. And actually it does lead to positive culture, which leads to business success.
Yeah, I think that really ties into what Sisieta, when we spoke previously, that's something that you're quite passionate about as well. So it'd be good to hear, what you think and how it ties to what Bona said.
Yeah, I've just been listening to Bruno, and there's something to say that really struck at me, because I probably would have liked to speak to my younger self, because I've only just got that realization in the past couple of years, and I've passed it on to others that I'm mentoring. Don't be driven in terms of owning the narrative of your career. Don't allow the brand drive your career motive, and don't allow the firm drive it. Know what you want, how you want your career path to be, regardless of the brand. You are your own brand, so you make your own brand, and then you create that career path. So Vona, you did the right thing, reassessed, asked yourself the questions, and that's the state of point I've come to in the last couple of years. So in terms of owning the narrative for my career, I'll probably say two things. From very earlier on, I knew exactly, what I wanted to do roughly, and how I wanted to get there. And for me, it was always checking in to make sure, what do I need to do? Am I on track? Am I doing it? So in terms of being accountable myself for my sort of career successes or achievements, I felt that was more in my control, and I didn't relinquish that responsibility or delegate that responsibility to anyone else, because I felt, well, if I did all of these things and I really pushed hard and knocked on the door, then I would sort of achieve my career success. So that's one thing. Always make sure you're doing everything within your own self, everything you should be doing or is expected that you should be doing, so you can never be counted as not performing as. And then the other thing for me is always on the career path. So don't be smithed by a company or by a brand or by a firm. Go in, know what you're going there for, know what your short-term, medium-term, long-term objectives are. If it comes to a point where that's no longer serving you to meet those medium and long-term objectives, then there's going to be somewhere else to go. There's going to be something else to go. Don't feel compelled to be complacent. You hear the parable, the adage just says, you're better off with the devil you know than the devil you don't know. I don't think that's true at all. I think if it's not serving you, then you're facing a very, very giant devil. I think the risk there is even worse, and I think that you should then reassess and actually move along. So I suppose that's the bit that I would add to that.
That's really good to hear as well, and it really ties in with what Vona said as well, with career progression, holding yourself accountable, always always checking yourself, like, where do I want to be? Is this really what I want to do? But yeah, so that's that. So it would be good to get understanding this. I'm opening this question up to everyone, just to hear from your experiences how the lack of representation has impacted your career, and how can we improve representation?
I'm more than happy to step in there, Chammi. So I think for most of my career has not been clearly defined. I have no idea what I wanted to do, still don't really, but I always go for things that I like and that feeds me. And undoubtedly, it's kind of ended up in spaces where I literally was the only one in the village, right? Literally the only Black person. I remember the first time that I was working in a museum because I had an interest in the arts. and literally was the only Black female in that space. And at the time I was living in New York, and it was a place where you could make a career out of it. But I remember coming back to this country and thinking, actually, those sort of jobs are only for people that've got trust funds. How could trying to explain to my mum that I'm working in a museum for next to pittance as an acceptable career choice? And so I think the cultural aspect came into me, which is then, okay, veer off, and then eventually ended up in financial services. Another space where I happened to be, again, one of the very few people of color, just getting used to it. That's been my background. I seem to be the only one. I get on with it. I don't let it affect me so much, but I'm very conscious. And I think I was conscious when my son was doing his work experience, and he came to my workplace, and because I'd been there a while, I was able to set up a whole series of meet X, Y, and Z in different departments, and he loved it, and everyone was generous with their time in showing him everything. And then I says, me very excitable. So is this the sort of area you want to go into? We're excited. Which area did you like the best? He goes, it was all really good and everyone's lovely. But he goes, I didn't see anyone else that looked like me. And I think that was a light bulb moment, which was just, that should not be something then that's going to stop you from going somewhere, thinking you are the only one there. And for me, a big passion is bringing those that normally wouldn't be in those spaces into those spaces to say, you know what, you belong too. You can be here. You can have the opportunity, if you really want to, be in this space to change things up a bit. So it's very important, at least for myself, to have had the recognition that it's not necessarily something that people can adapt to quite easily. Some people will leave because they're just like, you know what, I'm not seeing myself. Hence the reason I'm a big advocate of multicultural groups or employee resource groups where you can find your tribe. And for me, that was very necessary in most of these places that I went to, but not everyone's going to feel that comfort. So what can you do then to change those demographics and allow those new, fresh talent that may not look like the traditional lot come into that space to redress the balance?
Yeah, I would. Go on, Ollie.
Just quickly then, I was going to say, I'm happy to add on to this. So for me, in terms of being the only person who looked like me in the room and that, impacting my career, it did so, but in a different way. I grew up in an area where I was the only person who looked like me. I've since traveled in many different locations and countries. You can probably tell from my background. But I grew up in the UK, in London, in Wimbledon, where I was very much the only person, the only Black girl in my class and school, and so on and so on. So by the time I got into the workplace, it was regular for me to walk into a room and be the only Black person and potentially the only Black female. But it was, I think my realization was before making partner at Accenture, and I went to my very first, so I was the level below, and I went to my very first Black forum event at Accenture. And there's a whole nother conversation around why I went at that particular time. But I remember listening to all of these stories from people who looked like me, people of all different backgrounds in terms of just age. There were, different people from different departments. And the common thread I kept hearing as everybody spoke about their story was just how uncomfortable people truly felt in the workplace. And this was well before we started having these open discussions, right? This was well before it became the norm to talk about the uncomfortable. And something just resonated with me that I think, similar to Yvette's story, this isn't right. And I remember going home well, my brothers weren't at my home, but I remember going home and picking up the phone after work, and I spoke to two of my younger brothers. I'm one of 5. And I said, guys, do you walk into a room, like, we grew up in Wimbledon, do you have the same notion that I have? So when you go into work, yes, you're the only Black person, but because of our upbringing, does that faze you? And they said, it absolutely does. And I realized that even though I grew up in the same household as even my siblings, I still had a different lived experience to my two younger brothers by virtue of the fact, I think, that they are male, very tall, big guys. So it just became uber clear to me at that point, I have to do something. And I think the real nail in the coffin was making partner. And Accenture, 500,000 people globally. And when you make partner, they send out the emails and what have you, so everyone can see around the world who's made partner that year. And I just started getting these congratulatory messages from people all over the world who I'd never met before. And I realized I was then their hope. And for me, that was what was the trigger. That was what, in a sense, impacted my career, but not for the reasons I guess you would have potentially imagined upon me saying that sentence. But it impacted me because it was really the start of my really being a true advocate in this space. I realized I had to do more. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely faced inferiority complexes growing up because I had to get past okay, I am the only black girl in school. So I went through that phase, but here I am in the corporate world, and people even older than me are still going through that. It's not okay. I have to do something. I have to be part of the journey. And here I am.
Yeah, I was just going to add something to that because you've articulated a lot of what I was going to say so well, Ollie. But the thing for me is I think it came with age. I had at school and friendship groups had quite a multicultural background. I'm mixed myself, so both South Asian and Nigerian. And it was never a thing for me when I was younger to notice that I felt out of place necessarily. Even in my first role, which was in quite a small company, even though it was majority white, it wasn't really a feeling. It's only when I progressed to a bigger organization, and maybe with age as well, began to understand that there was a disconnect there, despite being fairly junior, being only probably the most senior black man in the building, a building of 400 people, which to me felt a bit uncomfortable. And I think today it still persists. I think that that feeling that people have is completely legitimate, that you can't see anyone similar to you above you. And it doesn't necessarily limit you, but it makes you question and doubt sometimes. And it means that you have to be thinking that for you to achieve that, you have to be doing something different or doing something more to be able to succeed where others may have been stopped or limited. The other side to it is also, for me, still working in environments where I don't see that many black people or people of color. When you do see someone, it's like, oh, hello, there's someone else like me in those spaces. And it's so strange that there's a reaction to just seeing someone of the same color in those environments. And that's quite hard to kind of articulate, I guess, to a way that many people would understand that haven't experienced that.
Do you guys feel the pressure not to let the race down? So the fact that you're the only one, and then so an undue pressure to make sure that you're performing so as not to let the race down.
I feel the pressure, but probably not in that sense. So not the pressure of letting the race down, but the pressure of not letting a self-fulfilled prophecy take place. So like stereotypes materialize. So when I feel the pressure of being the one to try and prove wrong whatever biases or whatever thoughts are in a person's mind. So I think from an education standpoint, to say, actually, that's a stereotype, and that's a stereotype that has been dead for over a decade. I'll show you why. So that's where I kind of feel the pressure from, as opposed to maybe not necessarily directly letting the race down. And now I'm just going to jump in and add a couple of things as Ollie and Rashid were speaking. In terms of, so there are two angles to look at this, because for me, the term different strokes come to mind, because there's another perspective of, so Ollie, to your point, you're already used to growing up as being the only one, the only Black person. That what I then realized in going through my career, and especially when you know, I landed in the city, in the corporate world, and I got put into the first one of these ethnic minority leadership programs, which I happily went along to, because, you know, I'm always curious. I always want to see what happens in these places. And it became very clear that there were different types. It was almost like different people, different places. So there was the type, because I grew up in Nigeria. I went to boarding school in Nigeria. I was born in London, but parents migrated back to Nigeria when we were little. So secondary school in Nigeria, you know, very comfortable in my own self. And I think that gave me the baseline confidence in who I was. Like, I came out very confident. So even when I came back here to do my A-level to university, I had that confidence, like nothing could actually tear that down. Like, I was like, you know, it's already been instilled in me. But then when I started to realize, from speaking to peers, from speaking to others, they grew up here. It's a different experience. So that, because my question was, why are you not as bold as me as owning your identity? Why are you not as bold as me as being authentic? Why do you have two personalities? Why do you give me the nod and you can't, like, you know, speak to me how you speak to me outside of the building, for example? Just little things like that. Why is it that you can't just represent who you are and show who you, why can't you turn up, back to the point of having the hair, why can't you turn up with your natural hair packed up in a bubble? Like, what is all of that? And I was trying to understand what's underlying that. But actually, when it came down to, when I really got into having the deep conversations, the people who grew up here and have completely different experiences, and their way of actually getting past that is obviously to maybe have a double personality or fight very well to conform on what they think, how they expected to behave versus how they should really be. And that was a light bulb moment for me. That was a real realization, because to me, I was completely blind to that. I thought, you know, everyone should be comfortable in who they are. You should be able to be who you are and be free. So, you know, that's why I said the 10 different strokes came to me, you know, as I was just listening to Ollie's and Rashid's story.
You know, it's really good that you said that, because for me, I was born in Zimbabwe, and I spent quite some time in Zimbabwe as well, and then I moved over here. And I feel like when I can't remember who it is that mentioned, I think it was Bruno or Sisieta, you said when you moved over here, you realized you were Black. You're like, oh, I'm Black. And I feel like it really does knock on your confidence as well. You can't be yourself. And growing up consistently from secondary school all the way through to come into the workplace, you basically get conditioned to live a double life. And literally everyone, like most Black people that I know, my friends, we basically live double life. And it's something I feel like that does affect your confidence. You can't reach your true potential because you can't be yourself. Unlike compared to your peers who come in and they're themselves, they go home, they're themselves. It's very different for us. So my question would be, going off this topic, how can non-Black people practice genuine allyship to support the Black community, help us, you know, create more inclusive environments, you know, support their colleagues?
So I'm a big advocate of don't just take on the title of being an ally, because you have to be an active ally. And also, in terms of being active, it is something where you have purpose driven, and it comes through education. So we've gone through a social movement in the US that's cascaded across the world globally, from George Floyd to Black Lives Matter to the pandemic. And so we are now aware there are issues out there. We understand there is not true equity out there where everyone starts from the same starting point. We know that now. So those who are looking to redress those inequities, they have to do a little bit of work, right? They have to do the educational part. They have to know that Google is free. If you don't really know anything, you can go there. They have to also make sure that they are fully conversant, not to what I'm saying to the point where a term that I have to be very careful around is the use of the word, say, white ally, because then you veer off into the savior, white savior, which is not, again, something that you need. You need someone that's going to be walking side by side and be your advocate bystander, right? The person that's going to speak up for you, or for the person that's marginalized in maybe those team meetings, because they know it is wrong what is happening. And so you have to be an active ally. And I think there are people that are stepping up to it. I've seen it in my workplace, but there's still people very much on the other end where they still can't even have a conversation to say the word Black. And we do understand that they need to go on the journey at their pace too.
So how would we create a comfortable environment for people to have those conversations? How do we go about those conversations? Because we've had so many webinars, talks about diversity, and it's proving hard to hold people accountable, to actually have those measurable metrics. So what would you say we can do to actually, hold people accountable that are, allies of the Black community, making sure that they are actually implicating things that are measurable?
So I'll take this one. I generally talk about, when it comes to action on this topic, I talk about 4 things. And we covered education a bit, and that's definitely one of them. So education. The second is investing. So investing in your communities, investing in people. That could be putting someone on a training program or a leadership advancement program, or whatever the thing could be. Then there's also advocation. So advocating loudly, and I think Yvette talked to it, be an active advocate, as opposed to a bystander, right? A silent bystander. The last for me is probably one of the most important, and this is hopefully going to address your question. So this is really accountability and evaluating. So evaluating what it is that you've said that you're going to do. And a really easy way to do that is to say, this is what my objectives are, whether it's the firm's objectives, your objectives as a team, as a group, as a leader, and putting it out there, and then evaluating where you've got to. And it doesn't have to be groundbreaking, but it has to be out there. You have to be able to hold yourself to account in front of other people, just like a business holds itself to account to its shareholders. And quite frankly, for me, the best way to do this is with leaders. It starts from the top, because leaders have to feel that they are accountable for creating that psychological safety. A lot of leaders in organizations are measured on a number of metrics, but those metrics may not include diversity and inclusion. And the other thing that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, what people really talk about a lot is diversity, right? We can measure how many Black people are in the organization, or how many females, etc., etc. But you can't even measure that sometimes that well, because you don't have the data. Somebody has to opt in to giving that data. And if they don't, you don't have even the diversity data. What's impossible to track at the moment is inclusion. How have you made someone feel, right? How does somebody feel in terms of their levels of inclusion? And that's the bit that we are lacking. So because of that, I feel it starts with leaders, and where we are measured for revenue or sales or profits, right? Very tangible metrics, tangible numbers. We also need to be held to account in regards to inclusion. How are we seen as being inclusive leaders and creating that psychological safety in the workplace? So I think once organizations start to measure leaders to that account, it will naturally ripple through. It really will. But until then, I think it will be tough. But there's definitely things that we can be doing, I think, in that arena.
I don't know if anyone wants to add anything else as well.
I would say I agree with everything Ollie said. I think that the tricky thing is getting people to set those objectives in the first place, and not just to be talking about diversity and inclusion as something that they care about, but actually meaningfully acting on it. And I think that's the biggest challenge we have at the moment, because I think if you ask anyone, or most people, they will tell you, yeah, it's important. I don't think it's right that we talked about the example around CVs, where if you have a name like John Smith versus a name like Rashid Giwa is going to get 50% less callbacks purely because of his name. But we know that, we've known that for ages, but there is still a reluctance to address it in a meaningful way. I think that to make that change, what we need is more people like us to be encouraged to having conversation with potential allies, to be creating a larger group of voices that can hold those leaders to accountable. It's far harder to ignore the issue if your whole company is saying that they need to have these objectives in place, rather than it just being, it's that black guy again, he keeps talking to us about having some objectives, we can just ignore them, can't we? Yeah, all right, let's leave it. And so we need to create better communities, not just with within Black people, but people of color and anyone in organizations that want to help, to try and create that impetus to want to have those objectives.
I think if we're going to move towards actually getting action done, we have to align stuff to compensation. So pretty much you will feel it in your pocket if you're not meeting those objectives, like any other tangible objective that a company wants to cite to meet your, performance management, performance period. You need to align it to what is going to not get into your pocket. People will react then. And even if you then get some of those that may be reticent in the first place around a D&I, objectives, they will get wise to it. And I think we are veering towards that less gentlemanly, we should be, let's all talk about it, and more into more pragmatic aspects. Align it to compensation.
I think that it also I definitely agree that it has to be done through policy, but I think it definitely has to be hand in hand with things like what we're doing. So having these honest conversations, and I know that people are tired of having these sort of conversations. People are tired about hearing about diversity, but I feel like it needs to continue. And then people like us also need to be able to call out situations when we see them. So I'll give you an example. There's somebody that I know that I worked with in the past who was replacing his role, and he literally, in the same conversation, he literally like replaced his role with somebody who was exactly like him. And that's what people do, right? It's unconscious bias. And I'm not saying that was wrong, but he couldn't see that he had, no, actually he knew he had, because in talking to me, not that I brought it up, but in talking to me, he kind of tried to justify it, saying, oh, I knew that he seemed exactly like me. It's like exactly same background. They looked alike, they talked alike, they came from the same company. And he was justifying it and saying, oh, because he knew that it looked like him, he made sure that his boss and somebody else interviewed this person again, just to make sure that it wasn't him. But the two people that interviewed this other person are exactly like him as well. And so I was like, okay, interesting. I didn't call him out on that, but then we had a separate conversation, and he was saying to me how, oh, this is somebody that could have been a great ally and great mentor for me. But he was saying to me how the way I've done the role, I haven't really raised my profile. I haven't done this and that. And that's where I stopped him and had to explain to him that I'm not you. Yeah, you did the role, but I'm not going to do the role the way you did it, because you are you. I am me. Am I competent enough to do the role? Yes. Am I doing the role well? Yes. So why this expectation for me to? And he was surprised, because he didn't realize that you're putting a heavy burden on me that you wouldn't necessarily put on this new guy you've hired who looks exactly like you. And so I feel like we need to have this conversation, and because sometimes I don't think people know what they are doing. Some people know, but sometimes they don't realize, like they say, it's unconscious, right? And so having conversations where you help people to see their privilege. I have the reason why a lot of people are tired as well is because they feel like, oh, these conversations make it seem as if their own achievements, they didn't work hard for it. And he's trying to explain, no, he's not saying that you didn't work hard for it, but he's just saying that there is a system that doesn't even give other people the opportunity to get in to play the game. And then the few that have gotten in to play the game, you put higher expectations on them. You tell them, raise your profile. Whereas this other guy here hasn't raised his profile, hasn't done anything. All he's done is his job, and he's going up the ladder, and we're watching him go up. So it's helping people see with real life examples that actually, let's call it spade a spade. Like, privilege exists, white privilege exists, male privilege exists, even social class privilege exists. And when people start to see, then I feel like those conversations, those calling out, in conjunction with the policies happening at work and making people accountable would help.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add? Or
I would probably say the fatigue that's coming through is also partly due to the fact that a lot of people have been brought into these forums and conversations, and the terms of the new terms that come on board as the allies being and the white privilege and the sponsorship programs, and a lot of people brought into that, but then a lot of people also not seeing the commitment at the other end, or the transparency of what's happening, or the output as to what exactly, where is this heading. And there's some people who operate on a very results driven basis. So if they're going to be into something, then they've got to know that, okay, their milestones were achieved, and then this is what we've achieved, and this is the success, this is how we measure success, and this is what's happening, so we're moving in the right direction. And for those set of people, then it becomes fatigue when they keep hearing about it and they keep being pulled into forums and they're not seeing anything happening. So if we're going to cater for holistically, to your point, Bruno, I think the underlying conversations with people like us and by the side within the roles, keep having the conversations, but also it needs to be part of the firm's overarching governance structure. So I would say, and transparency is very key as well. In terms of accountability, sign up to a charter. There's so many external charters now that are run. If you want to have real accountability and you say, yes, I'm committed to meeting this XYZ, and it's not just a tick box, sign up to the race charter. That gives you very clear objectives of what you should be doing. And one of the first things the race charter says is you should have a designated task force within the firm that looks at XYZ in terms of the ethnic minority space, or the race space, or the race gender. So you sign up to that, that's what you're achieving. That then suddenly becomes part of your governance framework or your governance structure, which then derives its own KPIs. And then others can kind of see that, oh, actually, senior leaders are now having to, this is like a committee, it's like your RISCO, your EXCO. You now have this other committee running beside, your main governing bodies. We want to join in, we want to be part of that, we want to do something, then somehow you get the traction, somehow you get the momentum. And I think that's what's, that's the piece now that is really missing. I think the groundwork of the educating, training, talking, forums, I think we've kind of pushed it off the floor, but now it needs to be taken to another level, which means transparency, accountability. If you're ready to put your money where your mouth is, sign up to one of these external charters, get measured publicly, display your results publicly. The regulators are doing it, the FCA is doing it. I think financial services firms should be doing it. Every financial services firm should be doing it. Are they doing it? Maybe not.
So what would your thoughts be on sponsorship programs that are in place right now? Because I know we had quite a controversial discussion in regards to that. What would your thoughts be on those systems that are being put in place to support Black people or support Black leaders?
I think the intentions of those are really good. I think the intention comes from a good place. I think it is needed, it was needed, but I also think that we shouldn't, especially in the last couple of years, we shouldn't be blinded to the risk of complacency and the risk of perception, what everyone else has to think, that you're just, you're just a diversity hire, you've only, got the role because, we've got this sponsorship program. So it's almost automatically, if you get on the sponsorship program, then you get the role. My thoughts are then that brings us back to ground zero, because where we would normally think, okay, we need to get all our qualifications, we need to be the best, we need to be better than the best, that suddenly you could start to feel a little bit complacent, as in, this whole being a victim, the entitlement feeling comes in. I'm entitled to this because I am X. I want to go on this sponsorship program because I am from this ethnic background. So is that risk of falling into that entitlement zone and being complacent about owning your own career, be accountable for yourself, ask yourself the questions daily. Will I hire me in that role? You know, if I was the CEO, would I hire myself as a deputy CEO? Those are the questions we need to be asking ourselves and challenging ourselves daily, because I fear that there's that risk. Then there's the outer perception that just sees you, you know, suddenly having a role and think that, oh, you only got it because, you know, it could have a counter effect. You only got it because you're an ethnic minority or you're on that sponsorship program. So we've got to be careful. And then that brings us back to the imposter syndrome. And then there's the added thing of, you know, becoming a token or target. So you go through the sponsorship program, you land on the role or land on the job, and then, you know, you suddenly become a target or you become a token, and then you have to find a way to quickly realize when you're one or the other and how to manage them. So for me, I think the sponsorship programs are good, but we should also be mindful and cautious of the other things at the other end that could materialize, and how we make sure that we're nipping those in the bud and making sure those are not happening as well.
I think, Verna, you had some conflicting responses to that as well.
Not as conflicting, to be honest. And when I heard CCS's explanation, it did make sense. Yeah, there is the risk of being tokens. Even though I've heard friends say, I don't mind being a token. I don't care, as long as I'm succeeding and I know that I am competent. I don't mind being seen as a token. So I've had some friends say that, but yeah, honestly, it can be nice for your colleagues to think, oh, you're only there because of your skin color. So I do get that, and I do get that some of these programs to be having set up just to tick boxes, not that people really care. What I was trying to say was, and I used a Nigerian proverb, which is, let's not throw away the baby with the bathwater. And what I mean is, when you're bathing a child with the bucket, and then I guess in the rural, whatever, in the village or in the rural area of Nigeria, you go outside and you want to throw the water in the bucket away, and the advice is, don't throw away the baby while you're trying to get rid of the water. And so these programs are achieving some things, and yes, they are not perfect, but we need to be careful not to dismantle them because they're not perfect. And let's not forget also that they're trying to solve systemic issues. Yeah, so I think the programs are good. What I've never experienced in any of the companies I've worked for, they've never had sponsorship programs, or maybe if they do, I'm not aware of them. But what I've seen happen is informal career sponsors pull people up, and obviously because most of the organizations are filled with people, with white people, or people, we don't have a lot of Black people there, and what you find is that Black people are not really being sponsored. But I have been a product where I can testify of the power of sponsorship, because I have experience being sponsored and I've seen the difference that it makes in your career. And even then, like when I've been sponsored, I'm very conscious that actually, no, I have a stellar CV. I am competent, like I deserve what I've gotten. But I'm also very aware that actually, if this person did not decide to sponsor me, I would not be where I am. So yeah, sponsorship is key, whether it's structured or it's people realizing, and that's where strong allyship comes in, active allyship, right? It's not just speaking, but in rooms where you can make a difference, speaking up for those people who aren't in those rooms. I think that's important.
It's interesting when you were talking, Siesta, is around the bits that we naturally take on, right? Being the imposter, am I good enough for this, etc. Will other people think, you know what, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and I think we just have to accept that it's part of the course. The fact of the matter is that there's always a longer yardstick that is used against us, so to speak, compared to others. And feeling as well that, do you have to be always doing twice as hard and this and the other? No, why can't I be mediocre like my other colleague? And I think it's a sentiment that we have to change, where we're not going to push ourselves to burn out sometimes just to fit in, just to be accepted, just to be noticed. And we have to be then conscious around how we feel and how we're representing our other colleagues, because as much as we might have heard that there are targets which people felt a little uneasy about, I love the notion of quotas. And I know what comes with it, the negativity around the fact that you're saying you're deliberately clocking people in, because you need to change stuff quickly. You can no longer wait for people to go through this process that seems to be incredibly long and timely, and there's ums and ahs. You need to move the needle quite quickly and accept that it will be part of the backlash that might happen, and take that forward with you. I think we've just been around too long to accept, actually, I'm grateful that someone's noticed me. I'm grateful someone's given me the opportunity. And now I'm going to have to work and kill myself, literally, in order to be at supposedly equal level of my other colleague that doesn't look like me. No, you don't need to do that. Be as mediocre as the other person.
You agree? No, I agree with that. But does anyone else have any, additional points? Conscious of the time, it's now 7 p.m. So
I think sorry, Chammi, I think the only thing I wanted to add was, I think earlier on when we were talking about authenticity, something that you said, we were talking about, the fact that one cannot be themselves, and then because you can't really be yourself, then you can't really succeed because if you're not yourself, then it holds you back, right? And I wanted us to not address it, but I just wanted to address that we need to start asking ourselves, why are we stopping ourselves from being ourselves? I understand that I'm similar to Sisieta, where I grew up in Nigeria and I came here for A-levels and university. So it was when everybody around me was Nigerian. And so I didn't have any issues in terms of identity, in terms of my race. So I understand that my experience will be different from somebody who grew up here or somebody who grew up in America. Their issues are different as well. But we still need to ask ourselves, okay, now we've identified that, we're not being as authentic as we can be because we're trying to be, or maybe when I came here trying to speak, when I moved here trying to speak with a British accent, and I realized very, very quickly that was holding me back. Because if I could respond very quickly with my Nigerian accent, I can't respond as quickly with my British accent because I didn't grow up here. And so I learned very quickly that as long as you are speaking clearly and people can understand you, you don't need a British accent. Obviously, I've lived here for 21 years, so it will come in, but I'm not trying to speak with a British accent. And so I feel like we need to challenge ourselves to be authentic, because it would hold us back if we're not authentic. Be yourself. And if yourself is your straight hair, have your straight hair and own it. If yourself is your British accent and you are black and you speak like the Queen, own it. Whatever it is, own who you are, because that's the only way you're going to be successful. And the only way that you yourself would highly esteem yourself and your self-image. So sorry, that's the only thing I wanted to add.
And just very quickly, I'm not going to take it on much time. I think that's really crucial. And I think that has really fueled my passion for actually being part of this representation and trying to get others to be as bold to be their authentic self. Because like you, but I think on my side, like coming here and realizing, I did realize that yes, I was probably one in a minority here, but I took great pleasure in it, and I found it very exciting educating people. So when people come to me and go, oh, how did you learn to speak English so well? And I go, sit down, let me tell you a story. In Nigeria, there's so many, they're like 300 and something languages. Even my mom and dad don't understand each other. So guess what? We were raised speaking English. So English is the base man. Oh, really? And I just used to enjoy seeing it's like knowledge shared. So I probably took it a different way. And for me, maybe that's how I integrated myself very quickly, because I was very happy to do the education piece and share rather than and I never thought to myself to like I had to speak. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the whole way I was brought up and the fact that I was very confident in my own skin. I never stopped even to today. Taking offense. So when people say, why do I have to educate, or why do I have to, I always come from the point that it takes two to achieve what we're trying to achieve, right? So we've got to be very confident and comfortable in who we are and share that with others, educate them and bring them along, and then you will find a more willingness to really understand. And when they understand, then the action begins to come on the back of that. So in every time I have these conversations, I always say it takes two. We've got to partner in this. It's not, you don't just take offense because someone asks you a question. They ask you a question because they want to know. They probably genuinely don't know. Yes, you could get tired sometimes, but, have the conversation. Use it as an opportunity. That's your platform. Like, share your race journey with them. I'll stop now. Can't hear you, you're me.
Wow, that's rookie error. No, that was really, really powerful from everyone. Really good ending to the webinar, leaving us with something to think about. But I'm just gonna, wrap everything up. We are going to be having networking just straight after. If interested, if you want to continue the conversation, feel free to come along. The link is in the chat. But yeah, just wanted to say a few thank yous before we're done. First up, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who spent their time this evening and the audience. Also, big shout out to Lucy Neal for being the driving force behind this webinar and all our celebrations for Black History Month. You're very much appreciated, Lucy. Thank you for all the help. And our biggest thank yous goes to Ollie, Rashid, Cicietta, Verna, Yvette, for sharing your insights with us, for contributing to what is such an engaging conversation. But yeah, the conversation will continue in the networking event carrying on after this. So if you do wish to attend, the link is in the chat. Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.